Margie was awake the next morning when the phone rang. It was early, and she hoped Jake would sleep through the ring so she could surprise him. "Hi, Evan," she said. "Hi, Margie. How's my little man?" "He's strong like his dad." Evan laughed. Flattery doesn't work on soldiers. Margie grinned. It was worth a try. "He have a rough go of the chemo?" "Yeah, one of the worst so far. I still don't understand why a medicine that's supposed to make him better makes him so much worse." "Yeah, hopefully one day they'll find a better treatment." Margie heard someone shout through the phone line. "Everything okay?" "Sure. Guy's just letting off some steam." "You ever do that, Evan?" "What?" "Let off steam." "Me? No. Steam is pretty much what keeps me going." Margie laughed. "Is there anything you need to tell me?" Evan asked. Margie remembered she had to stay on point, so he'd be sure to have time to talk to Jake. You never knew when these calls could be cut short. "I already emailed you about the chemo, so no, you're up to date." "And you? What about me?" "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine. Well, I'm not fine, but I'm fine enough that I'd be thrilled to death if anyone else, namely you and Jake, were as fine as I am." "That's fine then," Evan chuckled. Margie laughed again. She loved that this man on the other side of the world, this man, who was in a life and death situation pretty much every day, this man, with the very sick son, this widower, this soldier, always managed to make her laugh. Margie stood and headed toward Jake's room. "I assume you're ready to talk to him?" she asked Evan. "Raring." Margie pushed Jake's doors open, and he lifted his head. She pointed at the phone in her hand. "It's your dad." Jake pushed himself up and grinned. His eyes flashed a hint of their old brightness for just an instant before pain dimmed them again. "Here's your little man," Margie said into the phone. "You take care of you," Evan said. She didn't respond. She handed the phone to Jake. "Hi, Dad." Margie adjusted the pillows behind Jake so he could relax, but still remained sitting more upright. She smiled at him when he said to his dad, "Yeah, Margie's been mean to me as usual. Really mean." His laughter rang out as she left the room. That night, Jake forgot again and tried to tell Simon about his conversation with his dad and his appointment with Dr. Betterman. And as usual, Simon said, "I want to hear about what the real Jake did today." Oh, yeah, right. Jake wondered why he couldn't remember that, but he'd worry about that later. "Today, my dad and I went to the movies," Jake said. He figured the real Jake would have a dad who was home to do things with him. "Really? What did you go see?" "Oh, it was a sci-fi movie about robots." "Oh, that sounds great. I went to the movies too. I had popcorn. Did you have popcorn?" "Yeah." "I bet you got butter all over your face, right? And on your clothes. And did you get some popcorn stuck in your teeth?" "I sure did." "Yeah, I did, right between my two front teeth." "Cool. What else did you do today?" "My friends and I built a fort out of sticks in the backyard." "Same friends you played with yesterday?" "Uh-huh. It was hot, and we needed more shade, so we built shade. I mean, not really. We built a fort, though." "I love building forts. I built one, too. I got a splinter. Did you get a splinter?" Jake felt his index finger and said, "Yeah, I did. I still have this little brown mark under my skin on the end of my finger from where I got a splinter once." "Another badge of honor?" "Yeah, exactly." Margie stretched out on the twin bed nestled under the eaves in her cave-like room. She'd always wished she was taller than her 5'3", but ever since she started working for Evan, her size had served her. Evan's bungalow was small, with a living room, a tiny kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a bath on the first floor. Then there was an itsy-bitsy room with slanted ceilings upstairs on what Evan called the half floor. He'd been using the room as an office, but he cleared it out and put in a twin bed, an almost doll-sized bureau, and a nightstand for Margie when she took the job. The furnishing was sparse, but the room had built-in shelves and cabinets. It also had a window that looked out on the upper branches of the apple trees in the backyard. One of the trees reached to within a foot of the window. The previous year, She'd been able to pluck an apple off the tree from her room. The trees made her feel as though she lived in a woodland tower like the cartoon princess Jake said she resembled. Right now, most of the window was obscured by a pedestal fan blasting not nearly enough air into the little room. Margie's hair blew over her forehead and stuck to her skin. She hated having the fan on high speed because it was almost as loud and droning as an engine. The sound made her nervous. She was afraid she wouldn't be able to hear Jake if he called out. Margie picked up her phone and tapped the recording app. Jake barely ate anything this evening, just a couple of crackers. If I didn't know better, I'd think he hated my cooking. She laughed, but the sound was forced. But I do know better. When I first came here, Jake couldn't get enough of my mac and cheese and my lasagna. She sighed, but he hasn't had an appetite in a while. Margie paused and listened. She was staring at the baby monitor she'd set on her nightstand. It was toggled to a high volume. Had Jake just made a sound? No, nothing. Margie set down her phone and ordered herself to go to sleep. She wondered if she'd comply for a change. The next night, Jake told Simon about the pizza he and his friends had after they ran through the sprinkler again. "I had pizza too," Simon said. "Did you get pizza sauce on your clothes and all over your face? I sure did." Jake laughed. "Yep, I think I still have some there." He thought he tasted tomatoes and garlic at the corner of his mouth. Wow, he must be getting good at this imagining thing. Because all he'd really had for dinner was a couple of bites of scrambled egg and 2 bites of toast. He still felt bad about all the food he wasted. When he had said so to Margie, she'd said, "Oh, don't worry, I'll box it up and send it to needy kids." That made him laugh so hard he snorted. He could just imagine a package of scrambled eggs going through the mail. "It would spoil," he said through his giggles. "And that would be very bad," Margie had said. "Very, very bad," they'd said together. "I'll tell you what," Margie had begun. "How about we send some of your allowance to a place that helps feed kids who need food? That make you feel better?" Jake had felt a surge of excitement. "Yes!" "Good deal," Margie had said. "So, what else did he do?" Simon asked. Jake immediately felt bad that he'd been thinking about Margie while Simon was there. Well, after we had pizza, we went to the twins' house. They have air conditioning, and we were all really hot." "What did you do there?" "We finger painted. Can you believe it? I haven't done that since I was really little." "Oh, I love finger painting, and that cool sloppy paint. I did that today too, and I got a different color paint under every one of my fingernails. Did you do that? I bet you did." Jake smiled at the thought of a rainbow of colors under his nails. "Yes, I did that too. Now my fingers are a rainbow." "Yeah, exactly, mine too." Jake was going to say something else about the paints, but instead, he yawned. "You're getting tired?" Simon asked. "A little." "That's okay. I can leave so you can go to sleep. But hey, remember what I told you. When you're well enough to walk around and do stuff, then you can come open the cabinet door. I'll be here waiting for you when it's time, okay?" "Okay." Margie stepped out onto the front porch to clear her head before she went to bed. Movement in the Hendersons' yard startled her, and she whirled to peer through the spotty light. "Sorry," Gillian Henderson called softly. "It's just me." Gillian stepped into the light cast by the front porch lamp. She was wearing a pale blue bathing suit under a darker blue t-shirt, and she was drenched. Margie suddenly realized she could hear the measured spitting sound of the sprinkler in Gillian's yard. "Were you running through the sprinkler?" Gillian grinned, tall and broad-shouldered. Gillian had the weathered face and flyaway sun-bleached hair of a farmer's wife, even though she was married to an accountant. She once told Margie she got her rugged looks from running after half the neighborhood children. Because Gillian was a stay-at-home mom with infinite patience, most of the kids tended to congregate at her house. And despite having a house full of kids every day, Gillian was always asking Margie if there was anything she could do to help. Margie figured Gillian was at least 15 years older than Margie, but they'd become good friends. "Fun is not just for kids," Gillian said. "And I was so hot. I was sure I was going to combust. Margie laughed. I hear you. When the kids are up, they don't want Mom in the sprinkler. It's embarrassing. She mimicked her daughter's voice. Are they at that age already? I think mine were born at that age, Gillian said. Margie laughed. Hey, you want to join me? Margie looked down at her t-shirt and shorts. Why not? Then she hesitated. The baby monitor. She pulled it out of her pocket and looked at it. She couldn't get that wet. Gillian saw Margie staring at the baby monitor. Wait here. She trotted toward her house. Margie listened to Gillian open and close her squeaky screen door. She watched a car go by, then looked up to find the Big Dipper. She spotted it seconds before she heard Gillian's screen door squeak again. She looked toward Gillian's two-story Craftsman. Gillian's house shared styling with Evan's, but hers was probably 4 times bigger. Gillian jogged over. Here. She handed Margie a zippered plastic bag. You'll still be able to hear it, but it won't get wet. You're brilliant. I'm a mom. Working the problem is my specialty. Margie dropped the baby monitor in the bag. Come on, Gillian said. Margie let Gillian lead her into the adjacent yard, and the 2 women began running through the sprinkler like little girls. Back and forth, in and out, twirling and skipping. They played in the water and danced all over the soggy grass. Dirt squished between her toes and water spraying in her face. Margie couldn't remember the last time she felt so light and free. After nearly half an hour, they staggered into Evan's front porch and collapsed, dripping on the steps. Margie realized her muscles were more relaxed than they'd been in months. For several minutes, they breathed and dripped in silence. Then Margie started to cry. Gillian put her arm around Margie and pulled her close. It sucks, Gillian said. It just sucks. He's a great kid. Yes, Margie said. He is. The next day, just before noon, someone knocked at Jake's window. Jake heard his name being called. He craned his neck to see around the fan. The sun's rays speared through the window and advanced nearly all the way through the room. Sweat trickled down his spine. Jake, you in there? Grimacing, Jake pushed himself up. Is that you, Brandon? Yeah, it's me. I came to see if you wanted to break out. Brandon's long face appeared just above the bottom of the window. The screen distorted his features. Oh, Brandon, I can't. I'm not supposed to even get up without help. I'm sure not supposed to go out. Yeah, but what if you wanted to? Brandon pressed his face into the screen to squish his nose. He made silly faces at Jake. Jake laughed. He looked toward his room's half-open door. He wasn't sure where Margie was, but he knew she was here someplace. If she had to leave the house, she got Mrs. Henderson to stay with Jake, and Mrs. Henderson always came in to give him a hello hug when she arrived. Margie didn't leave often, though. Mostly she had things delivered to the house. If she went out, he went with her, because most of what she had to do was take him to the doctors and to treatments. Come on, Jake, I haven't seen you in forever, Brandon whined. I miss you. Jake looked toward the window again. Even through the screen, he could see Brandon's blonde hair sticking straight up. He smiled. I've missed you too. Brandon was Jake's best friend from school. They used to be inseparable. For the first year after the doctors found Jake's pine nut, he went to school as much as he could, in spite of his headaches. Then he had brain surgery to try to get the tumor out. He was at home for several weeks, but he went back to school as soon as he could. The year before, he'd gone to school about half-time. Now, school wasn't possible at all. He was too weak and sick. But maybe he can go out with Brandon. Wouldn't that be cool? Jake was already dressed. He refused to sit around in bed in pajamas or underwear. Even on his worst days, he wanted to be dressed. So he had on green shorts and a tan t-shirt. He didn't have any shoes on, but he knew slip-on sandals were there, just under the bed. He could wear those. Are you coming? Brandon asked. I thought we could go to the arcade. If you're tired or weak, we can just do the racing games you sit down for. Jake loved the racing games. Okay, he was going to go for it. All right, give me a minute, Jake said. Okay. Brandon pulled back the corners of his mouth and stuck his tongue against the screen. Then he said, I'll be out here melting. If you take too long, I might be a puddle, but I'll be here. Just scrape me into a bowl or something, and we could go." Jake laughed. "Okay." He sat straight up and waited while his room settled around him. He blinked to make sure he could tell eye echoes from real things. He'd had double vision for so long he'd learned to adapt, but sometimes, when he reached for something, like a sock, he'd reach for the sock that was the echo instead of the real sock. Pretty sure he could tell what was real and what wasn't, Jake swung his legs over the side of the bed. All 4 of his pale legs were bony. "Come on," he encouraged them. "Hold me up. I'm not that heavy." His legs apparently disagreed because the first time he tried to stand, he fell back onto the mattress. Barely. He nearly fell to the floor but caught himself on the side rail of his hospital bed. When he'd first gotten the hospital bed, he'd been so upset. "I won't sleep in that. I'm not dying," he'd yell at Margie. "Of course you're not," she said. "But you're a good kid, and you know that if something will make my life easier, you don't mind doing it." When she'd put it that way, how could he refuse? And now, he was glad he had the bed. Using the side rails, he was able to prop himself upright while his legs remembered what it was like to stand on their own. He felt like a baby horse he'd seen once on TV. He was wobbling all over the place. But horses stood, and so could he. Jake concentrated, and he made himself stay upright, even though his head started to pound and pressure built up behind his eyes. He looked down, spotted the sandals, and fished for them with his right foot. No way he was going to be able to lean over. That would just put him on the floor for sure. Bending his knees to move his right foot around made his knee almost give out. Almost, but not quite. He was able to snag the right sandal and put it on. Then he planted his weight on the sandal, which gave him more stability, and he began poking the other sandal with his left toe. Eventually, he snagged that one too. From outside the window, Brandon called in a strangled cry, "I'm melting!" "Shh," Jake hissed. "Margie will hear you." Brandon laughed. Jake pushed away from the bed, letting go of the railing. His body swayed like a skinny tree in a big wind, but he didn't fall. He could do this. "Oh, I forgot to tell you," Brandon said, reappearing at the window. "Hey, you're out of bed. Good job." What did you forget to tell me?" Jake asked. He got up the nerve, and he took one stiff, hesitant step. He almost fell again. He was beginning to think this wasn't a great idea. "Oh, I forgot to tell you I brought my brother's wagon," Brandon called. "I thought you might need a ride to the arcade." Well, that would make it easier for sure. Jake could make it to the window, and then Brandon could help him out and into the wagon. Then Brandon could pull him. The idea gave Jake a little more confidence. "Why didn't you say so?" He called out as he took another step. This time, he was a little steadier. "The sun has melted my brain. It's running out of my ears." "Ew." "Yeah, exactly. Hurry." Jake took another step. He stayed up. He took another. He was still standing. One more. Still up. One more. He was clutching the windowsill, looking down at Brandon, who was pretending to sword fight an imaginary opponent, using a stick. "Hey, there you are!" Brandon dropped the stick and hurried to the window. "Here I am." Jake braced his hip against the windowsill and reached out to unseat the screen so he could push it out. His head went a little fuzzy and the double screen got a little difficult to separate out. He managed it, though. And when he gave the screen what he thought was a real shove, Brandon lifted the screen out. "Score." "This is so awesome," Brandon said. "Yeah," Jake agreed. "Okay, give me a second. Can I hold your arm or something?" "Yeah, that would help." Jake managed to plant his butt on the ledge, holding onto the window jamb with his left hand. He reached his right hand out through the open window. Brandon took a hand. "I've got you," he said. Jake hoped that was true. Leaning his weight against the window jamb, he shifted his weight and swung his right leg through the window. He got a little too much momentum, and he almost threw his whole body through, but Brandon steadied him. His headache got worse, and his stomach started to do flips. He tried to ignore both. Concentrating, Jake was able to swing his other leg through the window. This time, he had a little more control. "Okay, now just turn a little more and slide out of the window," Brandon said. "I'll be sure you don't fall." Jake paused and peered out at the world he saw so little of these days. It was bright, hot, and dry, just as it had been the last time he looked. A roasting breeze stirred the elm's branches, and they made scratching sounds against the house's brown siding. Jake heard the twins giggling across the street, and he suddenly felt giddy, like he was sneaking out of school. Not that he'd ever done that, but it also felt like looking for your presents before Christmas. He had done that. He'd found them too. And then when Christmas came, it was a letdown because he already knew what he was getting. That was a lesson. Sometimes waiting was better. "Are you coming the rest of the way?" Brandon asked. "Oh yeah." Jake steadied himself in the open window. He took a breath and then slid out. If Brandon hadn't been there, he'd have ended up a heap on the ground. But Brandon was true to his word. He caught Jake and held him up. "You good?" Brandon said. "I'm okay." Brandon looked at Jake's face. He frowned. "Whoa, I didn't know." "Know what?" Brandon shook his head. "Nothing." He looked around. "If I help you to the tree, can you lean on it till I get the wagon over here?" Jake saw the bright red wagon parked on the sidewalk. "Okay." With Brandon holding him in a tight grip, Jake began to walk, but the nausea got worse, and his legs got weaker. Suddenly, Jake collapsed and vomited all over the dry grass. Brandon jumped back just in time to avoid getting spewed on. Jake was glad for that. He didn't look up at his friend. He was too embarrassed, and he felt like he was used up, sort of like an empty toothpaste tube, all squeezed out and limp. How was he going to get back up? The answer to his question came flying around the corner of the house. It was Margie, running to Jake, as if she knew he needed her. "What in the big wide world are you doing?" Margie's voice was higher than Jake had ever heard. Brandon took a couple of reverse steps, distancing himself from both the vomit and Margie's obvious upset. Jake heard a screen door screech and slap. And Miss Henderson came running out of her house. "I just saw what was going on. What can I do?" Brandon's eyes got really wide. He looked from Mrs. Henderson to Margie. He was suddenly as pale as Jake felt. Margie bent over Jake. "Come on, you silly boy. Let's move you just a little this way." Miss Henderson joined them. "Let me help." "Thanks," Margie said. Together, the woman lifted Jake and pulling him away from his mess, sitting him so his back was against the elm tree. Its bark felt rough through the thin material of his t-shirt. Jake pressed his hands against the tree's roots and held onto them. Miss Henderson squatted next to him. She brushed her fingers across his forehead. Margie straightened and pointed a finger at Brandon. "You!" Brandon winced. Margie glanced at Jake and Miss Henderson. Then she took a deep breath and turned to Brandon. She lowered her voice. "I'm sure you meant well, but you need to go home. And don't try this again. He's not..." She cleared her throat. "He's not well enough to go out right now." "I'm sorry," Brandon said. "I know. Now get." Margie softened her words with a half smile. Brandon ran to the wagon and grabbed its handle. He ran down the sidewalk with the wagon rattling behind him. Jake watched until Brandon was out of sight. He was watching fun and freedom run out of his life. Margie squatted next to Jake and Miss Henderson. "What were you thinking?" "I thought I could be the real Jake." Mrs. Henderson looked away. Margie twisted her mouth but didn't say anything. "You wait right here with Miss Henderson. I'm going to get the wheelchair, okay?" "Okay. Promise?" "Pinky swear," Jake said. Margie smiled and curled her pinky finger around the one Jake extended. "You just aged me several years." "So you're like, what, 100 now?" "Hardy har," Margie said. "That would make me 200, Miss Henderson said. She and Jake laughed as Margie trotted toward the house. Simon came as soon as Jake closed his eyes later that evening. Even though he was going to sleep earlier than usual, his little failed adventure had drained him completely, which sucked. "Hi, Jake. Hot day today, huh? So, what did you want to do today?" Simon asked. "Brandon and I were going to go to the arcade," Jake said. "You mean you did go to the arcade?" "Oh, yeah. Yes, we went." Jake smiled as he curled up. "And what did you do there?" Simon asked. "We had so much fun," Jake said. "We played all the racing games. I loved the racing games." "I love those too. I did one of those racing games today, too. And I won enough tickets to get a bunch of pencils. Did you win? I bet you won." "We did. I got smiley face erasers with my tickets." "Oh yeah, those are fun. I got one of those too." I like them because they cheer me up when I'm feeling down. You feel down? Sometimes. Not very often, though. I'm too busy having fun. Yeah, me too. So, hey, did you get a slushie at the arcade? Simon asked. I got one. I got grape. It turned my tongue purple. Did you get one? Jake laughed. He stuck out his tongue and imagined it was purple. Yes, my tongue's purple too. Purple power, Simon said. Purple power, Jake repeated. Jake couldn't believe how much he really felt like he'd gone to the arcade that day. He was sure he had. Oh, we did that dance game. Where you step on the light in squares. Me and Brandon, we were busting a move. I'm totally impressed, Jake. I mean, I'm pretty bad at those things. When I dance, I'm all like spastic and stuff. Jake could hear clothes rustling and little breathy sounds coming from inside the cabinet, like Simon was doing a dance move right now. You know what's funny? Simon asked. What? I did that dance game too, even though I'm a total spaz at it. I was so into it, I stepped on a shoelace and ended up breaking it. Have you ever done that? I did that today. No! So you know what that is? A badge of honor, Jake and Simon said in unison. Then they laughed together. What other games did you play today? Simon asked. I played the shooting game, the one where you're shooting bad guys, like robbers and stuff. Brandon wanted to shoot aliens, but I don't like to shoot aliens. I like aliens. I wouldn't do the hunting one either. I don't like shooting animals. I really like animals. I'm with you on that. Jake smiled. Thinking about the arcade games he liked made him forget about needing to see Simon. Were there any of your other friends at the arcade? Simon asked. Yeah, Jake said. A few were. Did you play pinball? Simon asked. Margie sat on the floor, cross-legged, in the hallway outside of Jake's room. Her back was pressed against the wall. The house smelled like the chocolate pudding she made for Jake a couple of hours before, and the lemon polish she'd rub on the hallway's wood trim that morning. Evan didn't expect her to do things like polish woodwork, but Jake was better off when the house stayed germ-free. And she was better off when she kept moving. So when Jake slept, she found things to do. The whole house was spotless and shining. Slumped against the glossy hardwood baseboard, Margie let tears slide down her face. She didn't want to listen. It felt like eavesdropping. But unless she put in earplugs, she couldn't avoid hearing what Jake and his visitor were saying. And she could never put in earplugs, or use earphones for that matter. She always needed to be able to hear Jake. And so she listened as Jake told Simon that he wasn't the best pinball player in the world, but he liked to try. I do too, Simon said. Margie got a distorted stereo effect as she listened to Simon's voice. It was coming through the door, muffled, and it was also coming through the phone she had held in her right hand, which was positioned next to the backup baby monitor she held in her left hand. Margie felt like a little magician, with the magic secrets hidden behind a shimmering curtain. If Jake got out of bed and came into the hall, he'd see how the magic worked. But he wouldn't get out of the bed without Margie's help. The secret was safe. It had been Evan's idea, and Margie thought it was brilliant. Evan called Jake almost every day, and in the first few months after the tumor was found, Jake was receptive to his dad's positive encouragement. When Evan said, "Keep your chin up," Jake always said brightly, "I will." But when the surgery failed, and Jake had to go through radiation and chemotherapy, he started getting sullen. For months, Evan tried to encourage Jake, and for months, Jake refused to accept the cheer. Evan told Margie they needed some magic. Jake needed to believe in someone who could pull him out of the horror that was his daily life and lead him into the joy of different possibilities. That's how Simon was born. Jake knew about the baby monitor that sat atop his chest of drawers. He didn't like it, but he knew it was there, and he'd accept the need for it. He didn't, however, know about the backup monitor that was inside the little white cabinet. That monitor was linked with the one Margie now held, and so it picked up and played Evan's disguised voice from inside the cabinet. Evan, still overseas, was Simon. Evan decided Jake would be more responsive to someone his own age, so Evan downloaded a voice distorter that turned his voice into a little kid's voice. When Evan suggested the idea of becoming a little friend for Jake, a friend who lived in Jake's cabinet and only visited at bedtime, Margie wasn't sure Jake would listen to Simon any more than he listened to Evan, but she went along with it. She was willing to try anything. But Jake did listen. He clearly loved the nightly visits. It made her smile when he closed his eyes right after she said goodnight. She knew he was trying to get her to leave the room faster. The more he imagines himself to be a normal boy, Evan had told Margie, the greater the odds he can be one again someday. He has to have hope. Margie had agreed. Jake started getting sleepy while Simon was talking about pinball machines, but he wanted to hear what Simon said. You know the secret to being really good at pinball? What? Jake asked. Nudge and tilt. What does that mean? Well, some people think it's cheating, but I don't. It's like when you shove at the machine, you know? With your hip or something. Sometimes when the flippers won't do what you want, you can save a ball with a little bump. Sort of. I wish. Jake stopped himself. He was about to say he wished he could try that someday. Instead, he said, I'm going to try that the next time Brandon and I go to the arcade. Yeah, cool. Jake yawned loudly. I think you need to go to sleep, Simon said. Jake mumbled, Yeah, I think so too. And remember, Simon said, when you can walk again, come open the door to the cabinet. I'll be here waiting for you. I remember, Jake said, and he fell asleep. Margie quickly stood and walked away from Jake's door. How are you and Jake doing in the heat? Evan asked when she put the phone to her ear. Margie stepped into the living room and sat down on the olive green sectional under the front picture window. I'm okay. I think it's draining him more, though. He's weaker than usual. Margie had already told Evan about the aborted arcade trip. Evan was proud of Jake's attempt, but relieved he hadn't made it far. That could have been bad, he'd said. Very, very bad, Margie and Evan said together. She grinned, thinking back to how the joke had started. Evan had wanted Jake to meet his uncle for the first time. Michael, Evan's brother and only living family, had lived in Europe for years, and he'd never met Jake, or Jake's mom. Michael was back in the States, and Evan was taking Jake and Margie to meet him. The drive one way was several hours. Michael's a serious dude, Evan had warned Jake and Margie as they traveled. He's a little different. He's intense about making money, and he's really good at it. But the way he is about it, and the way he is, it can make him seem like he's not human. So, he's like a cyborg with bad programming? Jake had asked. They'd all laugh. Just before they'd arrive at the hotel where Michael was staying, Jake had eaten a candy bar. No one thought much of it until Jake tried to hug his uncle. Michael, spotting the chocolatey fingers, had stepped out of Jake's reach. You must exercise caution. You could get chocolate on my suit, and that would be bad. Very, very bad. They had all had an awkward, stiff dinner together, and then they'd headed home. Driving down the freeway in the dark, Evan had said they should stop for gas, or they'd run out. That would be bad, Margie had said. And Jake had piped up from the back seat, saying, in a perfect imitation of his uncle, very, very bad. Margie smiled at the memory. Margie, you there? Evan's voice nudged through the phone. Sorry, I was thinking about that trip to meet Michael. Oh, that was bad. Very, very bad, they said again, in unison. They laughed. Margie wondered when that joke would get old. Speaking of Michael, I'll talk to him. I hate to ask him for favors, but I can't afford an air conditioner right now. I'll ask him to get one for Jake. Sometimes a soldier has to suck it up and take one for the team, Margie said. Evan laughed. You do that every day. What I do is a privilege, Margie said. Evan was silent. Then he cleared his throat and said he had to go. Now Margie leaned against Jake's door and listened to his even breathing coming through the baby monitor. Jake didn't snore, so it was challenging to know when he was deeply sleeping. Once, when she'd be sure he'd gone to sleep, she opened the door to his room, only to have him sit up and say, What's wrong, Margie? She'd had to think fast. I thought I heard you call out, she'd said. Jake had accepted it. You must have been dreaming, he'd said. Tonight, though, when Margie opened the door, Jake didn't sit up. He kept breathing deeply, with long inhales and exhales. He was asleep. But Margie still didn't move. She stood by the door with her eyes closed, listening to his breathing. Her closed eyes blocked out the evidence of Jake's illness. They erased the IV stand looking in the corner of the room. Jake didn't need it right now, but sometimes, when he couldn't keep anything down, they had to hook him up to receive fluids and nutrients. Her closed eyes removed the hospital bed and the line of prescription medication bottles marching across the top of the chest and drawers. They also transformed Jake's bald head back to the thick brown mess of hair that Margie could remember detailing when she first started taking care of Jake. He liked having his hair long, and Evan let him. "There's no law that says boys have to have short hair," Evan said. Margie thought that was funny coming from a man with a buzz cut. Margie opened her eyes and adjusted to reality. There was Jake curled up on his bed, Bodhi clenched against Jake's chest and belly, tucked under his chin. The pale yellow glow of the nightlight put a shine on Jake's bald head and cast deeper than usual shadows under his eyes. He was smiling in his sleep. That made Margie happy. She hoped he was playing at the arcade or running through the sprinklers, which reminded her she needed to get to work. Margie was 3 nights behind on her ongoing project. 2 nights before, Jake's sleep had been unsettled. He kept waking up. Margie was sure it was caused by a change in dosage of one of his medications. Thankfully, Evan had arranged for her to have the authority to deal directly with the doctors about Jake's care. So she called Dr. Betterman and told him she was returning Jake to the original dosage. That did the trick. But the next night, when he slept, she was so tired that she fell asleep and never got to her project. When Margie first started working for Evan, she thought she was going to hate the sleeping arrangements, being stuck in the little room on the half floor. She hadn't been looking for a live-in position. She liked her little apartment, and she was sure claustrophobia would do her in if she stayed here. But the position was full-time, with Evan being away so much. And over time, the house ended up charming her. Chock full of wood trim and built-in shelving and cabinetry that were common in craftsman homes, this house had even more character within its walls. Its original owner had obviously been fond of putting things out of sight, because the builder had put little hidey holes in every room. He also had funny little pieces of furniture specific to certain rooms, which had stayed with the house through the years. One of the pieces was the small white cabinet in Jake's room. The cabinet had sat empty for years. Now, though, it had a purpose.